I thank the organizers for inviting me to this. I would share a few thoughts today about the Prevention of Terrorism Act. In very simple words, the PTA, or the Prevention of Terrorism Act, is a bad law. The fact that it remains in our law books is something to be really regretful about. We should be really worried and scared about it. When we got the Constitution in 1978, the Constitution gave us a chapter of fundamental rights that we can go to court and we can complain if our rights are violated. So 1978, we get a Constitution that gives us justiciable rights. 1979, what happens? We get the Prevention of Terrorism Act that creates a legal situation that potentially the executive, particularly the police, the defense sectors, can violate those rights that were given to us. When it was enacted, the PTA came in as a temporary law. They said it would be there for a year, then 3 years, then after 3 years, the temporary part was removed and it became a permanent law. Since 1979, we have lived in Sri Lanka with a law that is like an emergency law. We have also had parallel emergency proclamations, and we have lived as Sri Lankan citizens in a state of emergency for a long, long time, for decades. When the bill was presented to Parliament, it came as an urgent bill. That means there's only a few days, 3 days, to discuss this law. There was hardly any debate in Parliament. There was much less debate in public about how bad this law is. Even with such little limited time, parliamentarians raised serious concerns about this law, particularly at the time, members of the parliament who were aligned to the SLFP. They drew the attention to how this law can be used against political opponents, which is what is happening today, and which is what has happened under this law for a long time. The law was discussed, debate, enacted in a day. Cabinet took the responsibility to pass this law with a 2/3 majority. This means that the Supreme Court didn't have to consider that very important question of whether this law violates certain rights, because the cabinet said, we will pass this by 2/3 majority. It is an acknowledgement that this law already has the potential to violate rights. Since the law of the PTA came into being, through regulations in 2003, 2011, even more recently, through PTA regulations, the power has expanded. The executive power that comes with the PTA has expanded. I'm just going to talk about what is in this Prevention of Terrorism Act. It has only a few sections. It has broad powers for arrest and detention. You can detain a person, arrest and detain a person under an executive order for now 12 months without showing the person to the magistrate or judicial officer, right? It doesn't properly define terrorism. It refers to ordinary offenses under our penal code. It doesn't talk about protecting people. It talks about protecting specified persons who are the president, people in parliament, judges. It talks about very specific categories of people that it protects. And what this law does is it creates offenses and tells the judiciary, you can't look into this, which is very different from the ordinary law, criminal law. So we have not experienced ordinary criminal supervision of the judges over these offenses when they say this is a terrorist offense. It is a very serious thing, because in ordinary law, when you're arrested, you're placed before a judge, typically 24 hours, and the judge is able to check whether this arrest is correct, whether there is sufficient information to make this arrest or not. All that protection is removed by the PTA. So even the confessions, which is under ordinary law that you can't take a confession unless it's given to the magistrate, unless it's given to a judicial officer, it is allowed under this law if it's given to a police officer. And there is a prohibition where you can prohibit publications as well as proscribe organizations. මම කියන්නේ මේ නීතිය මේ වගන්ති ටික ගත්තොත් මේ බලතල ටික ගත්තොත් ඒකත් හරි ආකාරයෙන් නීතියක් නෙවෙයි. මේ වගේ විශාල බලතලයක් දෙන ඒ බලතල වලට සීමාවන් දෙන්නේ නැතුව ඒ බලතල විනිසුරුතුමාගේ මේ සුපර්විෂන් එකට යටත් කරන්නේ නැතුව අධීක්ෂණයට යටත් කරන්නේ නැතුව නීතියක බලතලයක් දෙනවා නම් ඒ හරි නීතියක් නෙවෙයි. So the reason I'm calling this a bad law is because there is too much power which is not supervised under this law. I'm just going to finish by saying that we have had decades of experience. I have told you how bad the law is, but we have had decades of experience of how this law has destroyed lives of people. First, it was particular sections based on identity. Then it was any political opposition. And we've also had examples of police officers using this law, threatening detention orders against ordinary people. And when I say destroyed, when you're taken into custody without being told about what the reason for the arrest is, when your family doesn't know where you are, when you're detained in very far away places and your family can't visit, it causes so much difficulty for your children, for your family, for that person to even understand how can he defend himself if he doesn't know what the offense is. And for years, then being in remand without investigations saying that you have done anything wrong, and sometimes after decades being told that you're innocent. It destroys lives of individuals, it destroys lives of families, and it destroys lives of communities. Even today, people continue to suffer not being able to get their lives together, think about their children's education, they fall into destitution and poverty because of this law. It's almost like a virus. When it catches you, it destroys the fabric of that community. So it's a very serious thing because we have lost our ability to feel secure because of this law. We have no security because of this law. And until it happens to someone we know, we don't seem to want to voice an opposition to this law. So it's very important that when this law is used against persons of Tamil identity, Muslim identity, trade unionists, anyone who's a political opponent, until it comes to us, we are waiting because until we know the person, we think that must be a bad person. We don't have the idea that anyone taken has to be given a chance first to prove themselves innocent before the law takes its course and decide on that guilt. So there is a lot of failings as a society in Sri Lanka that we have not raised enough opposition. Certainly this law has stayed in place because it has been very useful for people in power, and that's why every successive government has maintained this law. But we have, and there is nothing good in this law, as I said before. මේ නීතියේ කිසිම පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් ප්‍රායෝගික වැදගත් දෙයක් නැහැ කියලා මම කියනවා. ඉතින් මේ නීතිය අහෝසි කරන එකත් කිසිම වෙනසක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඇතිතරම් නීති තියෙනවා ලංකාවේ ත්‍රස්තවාදී කියන වරද ගැන බලන්න. මේ නීතියේ සීමාවන් නැති බලයක් විතරයි තියෙන්නේ. මේ නීතියෙන් පුද්ගලයන්ට සහ ඔවුන්ගේ පවුල් විනාශ කරන නීතිය තමයි අපි දැකලා තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් මොහොත ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා අද දවස මේ නීතිය අහෝසි කරන්න කියලා ලොකු කතිකාවක් ඉස්සරහට ගෙනියන්න. බොහොම ස්තුතියි.